Yes, welcome to the Monday night edition of Free Talk Live. It is Monday, right? Just checking.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes I lose track of the day. They all seem to blend into one from time to time, every now and again, on occasion, with somewhat frequent reoccurrences.
That's easy for you to say.
Not really. I had to think about it too hard. I think if you see smoke coming out my ears, let me know. The telephone number, if you would like to join in the conversation, is 603-283-6160. Again, 603-283-6160. And you can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever's on your mind. We have some stuff that we brought in, or that I guess I brought in, that I would like us to talk about. Everybody says that the bird is the word, but there was also another word. It was Grease. Grease was the word.
Was it?
Do you remember the movie, Grease?
Yeah.
Honestly, I've never seen it.
You've not? Oh, wow.
No.
Geez.
I've seen people singing.
Well, it's too late now. They're going to ban it.
I know
That's
a lot
right.
of the songs because of karaoke. There's always people singing Grease songs.
Right.
at
Well,
karaoke.
in one of the songs, they sing, Grease is the word. Right?
See, I don't know that one.
It's,
Never heard that.
Frankie Valli, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, nobody, you spot on. Misogynistic, sexist, and a bit rapey calls for iconic movie Grease to be banned.
Yeah. When are people going to stop listening to these morons who are always calling for things to be banned? I mean, who cares what these people think?
It's not going to stop. It's just going to get worse. The more stuff that gets banned, the more people want to ban more stuff. And it's going to cascade until we have this totalitarian
But nothing's
regime.
actually banned.
Well,
They only have... People only don't watch things when they choose not to watch things. None of it is actually banned.
yeah. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the captain.
And Ian.
And nobody.
And this is from MSN.com, of all places. Social media users are calling to ban the iconic 1970s hit film Grease, condemning it for being sexist, homophobic, and slut-shaming. A Boxing Day viewing of the film on BBC One sparked outrage online. Really? Yeah. With many Twitter users calling the film outdated. Of course it's outdated. It was
an
made
old
in
movie.
78. I mean,
Seriously?
lower your expectations, people. There wasn't even
Are we
CGI
supposed to be
yet.
updating these things? Is there supposed to be like, Citizen Kane 17.0 out now so we can, fix all the errors in the first 16 versions of Citizen Kane?
I recently rewatched a science fiction series from that era, the late 70s, called Logan's Run.
I remember that movie
And-
vaguely.
And I mean, outdated? Oh, you bet your babushka. It is definitely outdated. But at the same time, still a good story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the society where they killed all the old folks, right? Like,
That's right.
you turned 30 and they just whacked you for no reason.
Yeah, except they didn't, outright just, murder people. I mean, they did, but, the thought amongst the population was that they were getting renewed, which meant some sort of recycling, like you were supposed to be going off and then coming back. And
Yeah, they were
whatever.
getting recycled, they thought, but actually they were getting recycled into Soylent Green.
Correct. Yes. For those not familiar with Soylent Green, that just means ground
It's people. Soylent Green is people.
It is. It's true. So, at any rate, Grease is on. It really has a terrible message, doesn't it? One user said. Sorry, but Grease sucks on so many levels. No plot, nothing interesting happens, and the message is pure misogyny, said another. The film is a lighthearted romantic musical centering around a high school love affair between Sandy, played by Olivia Newton-John, and Danny, played by John Travolta. Critics on Twitter complained about the lyric, "Did she put up a fight?" in the song Summer Nights, when Danny talks about hooking up with Sandy. Others shared disapproval about Sandy's friend Rizzo, who was slut-shamed for having unprotected sex. The drive-in scene where Sandy and Danny watch
She got pregnant. That's... that's kind of dumb. If you don't want to be pregnant and you're pregnant, you did something really stupid and you probably shouldn't have children. I'm sorry.
Agreed. But, this film was made in 1978, and I think the thing that's being lost in the translation between, 1978 and 2021 is the culture shift. 1978 was a completely different culture than 2021. you know, in many ways, shapes, and forms. And this movie was that generation's sort of coming of age movie, right? It was a bit rebellious in that there weren't a whole lot of parents involved, and if there were, you know, whatever authorities were just sort of skewed as like, well, we're gonna go do whatever, we're gonna race our cars, we're gonna, you know, date who we want, or we're gonna go party, and you know, that kind of stuff. And so I think the lack of understanding of what the, you know, I mean, I was born in 1972, so I was 6 when this came out, but like I remember, you know, people dressing as these folks did in this movie, you know, on many an occasion, and that type of a thing. And so, you know, I think it's just, it has to be treated like one of these time capsules, right? If you watch a movie that's, you know, 40 years old or whatever it is, you should have very low expectations, and you should treat it as a time capsule and look at it as like, wow, is this what people did back then? And like, oh, back in this day, you know, instead of criticizing it with the common current culture's, you know, rhetoric on what, you know, culture should be or would be.
Well, if that's what they want to spend their time on, there are a ton of old books and movies that have, you know, a little bit of racism or a lot of racism or a little bit of sexism or a lot of sexism. And it's like, really? Is that what you want to spend your time doing? Okay.
The lack of LGBTQ representation and diversity in the cast angered others.
Everybody just wants to be mad about something.
Yeah. In the film, a radio announcer at the school dance announces there were no same-sex couples on the dance floor. I remember that from the movie.
He announces that?
Yeah, he goes, all couples must be boy-girl. And this author says, well, Grease, shove your homophobia. But many came to defend the musical, calling woke critics oversensitive snowflakes. Yeah, I agree. Please don't ban Grease. I know all the words, and I've still got a crush on Danny Zuko, one user wrote. A third wrote, I really can't believe the snowflakes want to ban Grease. WTF. That's Whiskey Tango Foxtrot for you military folks out there. At the end of the film, Sandy transforms from a good girl to bad girl, impressing Danny with a new fashion style and attitude, and smoking a cigarette. The horror. Smoking a cigarette.
That was 2 syllables, right? Horror?
Yes.
Okay.
The horror. Quote, I wish my girl Sandy would have recognized Danny Zuko was trash and she didn't need to change for anyone, unquote. Olivia Newton-John, who plays Sandy, has previously dismissed sexism claims. Quote, it's a movie and a fun story, and I've never taken it too seriously. Just stop banning things, people. It never works. Yeah. It never works.
There will be no fun. There will be no history. All movies must represent 20 whatever year it is. What year is
21.
it? 2021 and nothing else.
Didn't they go back into E.T. a few years ago and edit out the guns from some scene with like the secret agents?
Yeah. I think I remember that.
And put radios in their hands or something like that.
These same criticisms for the movie Grease, though, could also be leveraged to any television show from that period. I'm thinking Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, that type of a thing. Right? Mm-hmm. Because it all had similar social construct at, you know, similar time, right? During that time frame, that late 70s construct.
Sure.
You know, whatever the culture was at that point. And so the same thing could be said for many things produced during that time, whether it's music or books or movies, television shows and whatever. You know, learn it as history. You know, you may not like it, but it's there. There's no reason to ban it. You start banning history, bad things happen.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
Open a history book. You would know that.
And the people banning books or burning books, they're never the good guys in reality.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're able to reflect historically.
Yeah.
You know, they might seem like a good guy at the moment. They're like, oh, this guy's trying to do some good and ban this horrible literature. But then it turns out, no, it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
603-283-6160. Do you want movies banned? I don't. More Free Talk Live on the way. Welcome back to the program. Welcome back to the show. It is Free Talk Live. 603-283-6160. 6160 is our telephone number here in the studio. If you'd like to join the conversation, again, 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the Reverend Captain Kickass.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
And we were just talking about cancel culture, wanting to ban the 1978 movie Grease. And I'm just so tired of cancel culture. There's no reason to cancel anybody or anything when it comes to freedom of speech, unless you're just a big wuss, right? If you're, I mean, you're on a social media platform. The platform has the right to, do whatever they want as far as that's concerned. But they don't have any need to, right? People will self-filter. People will self-group. It's the same thing with the television. If the television is broadcasting something and I don't like what they're broadcasting, guess what? I can change the frickin' channel.
Yep.
But that's not enough. You have to be incensed. You have to show the world how upset you are, because if you aren't
otherwise you're being insensitive.
If you're not angry, you just don't care.
I don't mean to be insensitive, but I don't want to be insensitive.
Warning, Will Robinson. Dr. Smith is irate.
Yeah. So, just stop banning stuff, everybody. Do the world a favor. Speaking of cancel culture, things change because of COVID, and COVID has this weird effect on things that were normal. And in that way, things kind of get slightly canceled. What do I mean by that? You might ask, and ask you might. I stumbled upon a graphic that I thought was a joke on the social media, and it was COVID CPR, right? So apparently CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. Many of you have taken classes in this. If some people at their jobs are required to take it and that kind of thing. If you work in any sort of like sports thing or whatever, you got to know CPR. Anyway, it's a life-saving technique, but COVID apparently has changed it a bit. And so I saw this graphic and I thought it was a joke. I laughed at it and I looked and there was a website. I'm like, I'm going to go check this website out. Turns out, no, it's not a joke. This is from St. John Ambulance, sja.org, which is, I believe, a UK website from Great Britain, or just Britain, because I don't see what's so great about it.
They're not that great.
It says, what is CPR? Well, CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. It combines chest compressions and rescue breaths to give a person the best chance of survival following cardiac arrest. We've updated our guidance due to COVID-19 outbreak. Do not perform rescue breaths on the casualty.
Wow.
They're already proclaiming you dead if you have a heart attack.
Well, wounded are considered casualties as well.
Oh, really?
That's true.
All right. I thought casualties were always dead.
No.
Okay.
No, that's just a formality.
Okay. But the important part here is do not perform rescue breaths.
Yep. So they are writing them off. Let them go.
It goes on to say, if an adult is unresponsive and not breathing normally, you still need to call 999 or 112. Those are emergency numbers.
Okay, so they're not saying don't bother calling anybody. Just have him send the coroner because he's going to be dead by the time they get there.
Right.
Yeah, they're saying call the emergency numbers for help and start CPR right away.
Huh?
Yeah, they say start CPR right away. And so here's the bullet points. What to do. Number 1, if you find someone collapsed, you should first perform a primary survey. Do not place your face close to theirs. If you have established from this that they are unresponsive and not breathing, you should ask a helper to call 999 or 112 for emergency help while you start CPR. Ask a helper
and
to
then
find,
don't start CPR.
Ask a helper to find and bring a defibrillator if available. I also just happen, as a side note, I love the word defibrillator.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just really like that word.
Everybody's got a couple of those laying around the house, right?
Yeah. Well, I've got one right now. No, I don't. So ask your helper to put the phone on speaker, hold it out towards you so they can maintain a 2-meter distance.
Oh, God.
If you are on your own, use the hands-free speaker on a phone so you can start CPR while speaking to ambulance control.
Now, if cowards mostly associate with cowards, maybe this will result in a lot of dead cowards and a better world.
I think so. I mean, it's still sad to see this.
It also says, do not leave the casualty to look for a defibrillator yourself. The ambulance will bring one. So that's number one. Number two, before you start CPR, use a towel or piece of clothing and lay it over the mouth and nose of the casualty.
Wow.
Put a mask on them. That's going to help.
Why don't you just grab a pillow and hold it down real tight over their face?
Yeah.
Again, before you start CPR, use a towel or a piece of clothing and lay it over the mouth and nose of the casualty.
Mm.
Then it goes on to say, start CPR. Kneel by the casualty and put the heel of your hand on the middle of their chest. Put your other hand on top of the first. Interlock your fingers, making sure they don't touch the ribs. Keep your arms straight and lean over the casualty. Press down hard to a depth of about 5 to 6 centimeters before releasing the pressure, allowing the chest to come back up.
That's about 2 inches.
The beat of the song Stayin' Alive can help you keep the right speed.
Wow. How do you know if your memory of a song in your head has the right
Well, you can
rhythm,
tell
though?
by the way... No, I don't know.
I can tell by the way I use my walk. I'm a ladies' man with no time to talk.
Some about being kicked around since I was born. Well, this guy's going to be dead because the next thing is in very bold black writing says, do not give rescue breaths.
He does not need oxygen.
Put a towel or a piece of clothing over his face.
And then don't give him any.
Don't give him any. The primary, thing that CPR teaches you you're supposed to do to resuscitate a person is to breathe into their mouth and to, sort of jumpstart their breathing.
The breath of life.
Yeah. Now this says, no, don't do it.
Screw him.
Number 3, continue to perform CPR. This is the new CPR. So apparently all you're doing is covering their face and then jamming on their chest to the song Stayin' Alive.
Wow.
It's insane.
No, this guy's not staying alive.
Imagine, I mean, the people who support all this madness surrounding COVID ostensibly are doing it to save people's lives, right? Like that's what's going through their head. They want to stay away from people because they believe it's going to help keep people alive, and yet when faced with someone who's actually facing imminent demise, the official instructions now are to basically do nothing.
Yeah, or don't do the one thing that's the most important part of CPR, which is the breathing.
Yeah. Wow.
It's ridiculous.
Go through the motions, just don't do the important part.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they could at least change the song that you're supposed to keep the beat to, because staying alive sure ain't gonna help.
No. Gotta use a dirge.
603-283-6160. Would you breathe into somebody else's mouth in a life or death situation performing CPR? More Free Talk Live on the way. So, we were talking about this thing from St. John Ambulance, sja.org, UK, which is a revision of the new COVID version of performing CPR, where you literally...
Back to the previous story for a sec, the banning of Greece.
Yes.
Here's something that would be a great business. Open a theater that just plays all of the movies and that have been banned.
And the TV show, right, yeah. That's a good idea.
Yeah, just play only things that they have tried to ban. That would keep all of the ban-happy morons out of the theater. You could go and have a good time with no social justice warriors at all present. You would be banning them.
That's true. You could have a second room with books in it as well.
Yes,
right.
All the banned books.
Library, right?
Have a banned library attached to a banned theater.
Perhaps that's an idea to expand upon Bandcamp, Banded.
Yes. There you go. We can have the whole thing at Bandcamp.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
and also have flutes.
Oh, of course. You have to have flutes at Bandcamp.
You mean the recorders?
Yes,
They call them recorders. What's the difference between a recorder and a flute? There's not as many notes.
The recorder
you put a little tape in a recorder, and then
No.
Okay.
The flute you hold sideways and blow across the top of it, whereas the recorder you hold down and you blow in through the top of it.
Okay.
It comes out.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm glad you know a lot about blowing things because
actually the first ever music that I wrote and performed was in, I think, 5th grade with a couple of my classmates. And I was on the xylophone. It was a junior.
I remember those
xylophone. Yeah. And then the one girl, she had the recorder, and then the other guy, he had like I don't know, some very small drum-like things. And we wrote this song and we performed it, and it was horrible. But that was the very first live music thing that
you've come a long way, baby.
Wrote and recorded. So yeah, a recorder was involved.
Okay.
So.
Wow.
But don't let that out to anybody because that's, top secret stuff.
Okay, we'll keep it quiet.
Keep it quiet. Shh. Wouldn't want it to get out on the radio.
Try to avoid talking about that on the radio then.
By the way, welcome back to our new old viewers on YouTube and Facebook, where we are now broadcasting again.
We are live.
Starting tonight.
We'll do it live.
So we're back. Until they get rid of us.
Well,
we're back.
We'll see how long it takes this time.
Indeed. Well, they didn't get rid of us before. We just kind of left because they got really crappy.
Well, they did get rid of us because they made it almost incomprehensible for us to stream live.
Yeah, they made it difficult. But there's a solution that I found this weekend, so we're back.
You're a good man.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. I have no segue, but I wanted to talk about this from the freethoughtproject.com. This was published today. A family fined, kicked off their own property while trying to live sustainably. This is out of Polk County, Georgia. There's no question that 2020 was one of the most difficult years in American history, as the government shut down the economy, driving unemployment to record levels and forcing businesses to close their doors forever. Tens of millions of Americans found themselves in dire straits. To deal with the unprecedented hard times, some folks like Tim Leslie and his family began to get creative, buying property and homesteading. However, because the land of the free is but a fleeting myth in this country, government officials did all they could to thwart it. Last year, Leslie lost his job. With no other options in mind, he bought a plot of land in Polk County. He parked an RV on it and began to live off the land. On the property, Leslie has chickens, goats, and a vegetable garden for his wife and their 2 kids, 9-year-old Knox and 18-month-old Daisy. We plan on building a forever home here and, growing old and giving it to our kids, Leslie told WSB-TV. After he was fired, Leslie took his life savings, draining his pension and 401k, and bought the property in Polk County. The purchase took place in November of 2020. The family's dreams of homesteading on their own property came to a grinding halt, however, and has morphed into a nightmare thanks to the intrusive and utterly cruel nature of the state. Leslie and his family are no longer living on their own property and are instead living in an RV park. This is because county officials forced them to move. The county issued the family a steep fine and then ordered them to move or face arrest and have his property stolen because living on your property in an RV is, quote, illegal, unquote.
See, why don't they, if they would just assassinate the people who enforce these laws, they'd stop enforcing them. I mean, this person just stole a guy's land right out from under him. Oh, yeah, you still own it. You just can't live on it. Yeah, just shoot him in the face.
Yeah, I don't think violence is the solution to the problems, but I understand the frustration.
There is no other solution. The other solution is let them push you. Excuse me. Let them push you and push you and push you until you have no place else to go, and then kill yourself. That's the only other option.
Well, I mean, you certainly have a right to defend yourself if you are attacked.
And you have a right to defend your home.
He would have had to have stayed there.
When someone comes onto your property, tries to move you off it, they are attacking your home. You have every right to kill them and to make it hurt.
You do, but it sounds like he just left on his own when he got a threatening letter. I mean, it doesn't sound like he's...
Well, the threat is the violence, though. As soon as someone is threatening
just because
you...
somebody sends you a letter in the mail doesn't mean you should
okay,
leave your
then
house.
get guns and wait for them to show up. And when they show up, blow their heads off.
In the Old West, when even after the Old West, even I'm thinking like in the 40s maybe. I'm trying to remember. There's several tales of when bureaucrats try and come and seize a person's property, and the community gets together and doesn't allow it to happen.
Yes,
that's what should happen here, in my opinion.
Absolutely,
this guy should have
but
support.
that would require a community who actually cared about freedom
and property rights.
And there's just not that doesn't exist, from what I can tell. I mean, we're trying to build one here in New Hampshire, but it's slow going. We need more people to move up here. If you actually have neighbors who can come to your defense, then you actually have a chance. I mean, even if you were going to take nobody's advice, and again, I don't recommend it, but if you were going to take that advice, you're going to end up dead. I mean, unless you actually have a community to back you up.
But if you can't live anywhere, if you can't do anything, then why not just be dead? What's the point in living if you have no freedom? If you can't even live on a piece of land that you bought and you paid for.
I get it, but none of us have freedom.
Take a few of them with you because they're going to kill you sooner or later anyway. They're going to starve you to death.
Maybe there's a better strategy.
You to death.
Maybe there's a better strategy than being a one-man band and going down shooting. There might be a better strategy.
I do think it's a matter of time, though, before we see that type of a thing begin to occur. I think it's inevitable that will eventually occur. 603.
Be clever if you can. Build a killdozer.
603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live on the way. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is Free Talk Live, the live call-in radio talk program where you can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever's on your mind. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the Reverend Captain Kickass.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
Our telephone number here in the studio, if you'd like to join the conversation, is 603-283-6160. 603-283-6160. We've been talking about this article from the freethoughtproject.com about a Mr. Leslie and his family who he lost his job due to the COVID shutdowns of businesses. And so he drained his
government
savings.
Took his job.
Basically. He drained his savings and bought himself a plot of land somewhere in Polk County, Georgia. And
which is a huge, step out into the land of the unknown, right? To take all your savings and put it into something, whether it be a business or whether it be a piece of property, whatever this, your life's dream might happen to be, and to take that step off the cliff, right? Like you're taking everything and you're putting it on the line, and then to just have it completely taken away from you.
Yep.
Yeah. And
what happened to his goats? Does he have his goats in his mobile home park? I
Probably
doubt
not.
it.
No, have you seen
he
the
does
rules
not.
at those places?
Or his chickens, huh?
Have you seen the rules at mobile home parks? They are not friendly, most of them, towards anything.
Certainly not goats.
So Mr. Leslie himself says, before I could go to court, they showed up at my property. The building inspector and the code enforcement officer had told me that I had to be off my land or they were going to seize my vehicles and all of my assets. This move is especially insidious for two reasons. The first reason is obvious. Leslie and his family own the property, and no one should be able to tell him what to do on it, especially due to the fact that they are a struggling family during unprecedented times in a supposed pandemic. The second reason is that Leslie checked the law before making these moves, and he is following it. According to WSB-TV, Leslie says he checked the county codes before buying the land. He showed them the section that allows for single-family dwellings in an agricultural district under which his property is designated. Under the county's definition for dwellings, it specifically includes manufacturers' homes, mobile homes, industrialized buildings, and recreational vehicles. It showed that we could have our animals here and be in our camper temporarily, so that's the reason we moved out.
Yeah. See, pull out a gun, you get off my land, and then call your friends. Get them to come out. Get everybody you can out there. Reinforcements matter.
Yeah, but your friends have to be willing to actually stand up for your freedoms, and so many people these days are so cowardly they won't even take a mask off.
Well, let them wear masks then.
That's not going to help. If you're too cowardly to take a mask off, you sure as hell aren't going to face down a bunch of bureaucrats with a bulldozer or whatever it is they bring.
Yeah, or even just be armed, when they show up.
And by the way, we did this back when Jay Noon, one of our former co-hosts, he had his property under threat in Massachusetts. He had not paid the property tax extraction, the extortion. And, he believed that he had the legal stuff straight as far as how to not do that and, keep having the property. And the town disagreed with his opinions about that, and they issued him the notice that they were going to tax sale the property and they were going to come take it from him. And so he contacted friends who actually were willing to show up, including Pete Eyre and myself. I believe Michelle Seven, JJ, a good crew of activists from the Keene area went down. There were a bunch of folks there from Massachusetts who he knew there as well. And we occupied his front yard for the day, and we did stop that from happening. The cops didn't come back for 6 more months, and then they came back at 4 or 6 a.m., and they did their evil deeds under the cover of darkness.
Mm-hmm. Of course, because, they're bastards. They're not going to be,
which is why what you need is a community of people in physical proximity.
I was just thinking it's too bad Jay Noon wasn't in New Hampshire.
Right. And plus, in New Hampshire, he would have fared better, I think, especially if we have, we got a tool like Cell 411, which I don't know at the time. I don't think we at the time did. I don't think that existed at all.
Right.
But, to have people who are in physical proximity that aren't that far is an ideal situation. If you've got to drive 45 minutes to get and back up your friend, you're 40 minutes too far.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed. Despite following the law as stated previously, Mr. Leslie's citation is specifically for, quote, living in campers /RV, unquote. This is a question about property rights, said attorney Ari Bargil with the Institute for Justice. Mr. Leslie owns the property on which he situated his camper, and as a result, he has the right to live there as long as he's not harming anybody through his use.
I'm glad to hear Institute for Justice has taken the case. They're a very libertarian law firm, and they do work for charity. That's basically all they do is they take cases that are like this and property rights violations and other freedom violations, and they'll go all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary.
Nice. One would think that the media coverage on the case, coupled with the egregious nature of kicking a family off their own property for trying to survive during a supposed pandemic, would make officials rethink their move. However, one would be wrong. According to WSB-TV, the county manager, the police chief, and the county commission chair all refused to comment on the case.
What are these guys' phone numbers? What are their names? Does it name the various officials involved?
Chief Dodd, apparently.
Chief Dodd? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give them a phone call tomorrow. Tell them what I think of them.
See, now that's a pretty good idea, and if there were enough people in the area who actually cared about that, they could make those people's lives difficult. There was some discussion last night. I won't give a lot of details, but there's a group of activists in New Hampshire that are talking about expanding the targeting of the bureaucrats from just the governor's house. We've been to the governor's house and the AG's house, the attorney general's house.
Right.
We've been there a couple times. We've been to the governor's house a bunch of times. And so what happens, of course, is a bunch of people show up at the governor's house, and there's, a bunch of cops that show up as well. And so all the police resources are in the same place. What if people showed up on the same day at the same time in a bunch of different places all across New Hampshire, like at the worst state representatives' houses? What if those people were receiving nasty grams in the mail? There are certain companies out there that will let you send some pretty disgusting items through the mail to somebody that you don't like. What if they started receiving some?
Yeah, let's start shipping them fertilizer.
Yeah, that kind of thing. What if they received some things that made their life as a state representative, where they get paid $100 a year, mind you, here in New Hampshire, very undesirable to continue?
I think that's a great idea. Make their lives a living hell, because that's what they've done
they're doing
to us.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. So apparently the police chief, the county commissioner, chair, and such refused to comment on the case, but Polk County Police Chief Officer Kenny Dodd had no problem.
Kenny Dodd needs a phone call.
Had no problem standing behind the move in an email to the news station.
Oh yeah.
Dodd,
he needs a couple of tons of manure delivered to his house.
Yes, he does. In an email to the news station, Dodd cited several codes for kicking the family off of their own property, extorting them, and threatening to steal their property. According to WSB-TV, one states, temporary buildings and trailers shall not be allowed in any district except when utilized for construction site contracting work. Another requires that single-family dwellings must contain 1,200 square feet minimum.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So if you want to actually have a tiny home, and isn't this something that's coming up in New Hampshire now, where I think I've heard there's a proposal at the State House to essentially legalize tiny homes across the state, because there are apparently some towns that do things like this where there's a certain minimum size for building, like in whatever zoning or codes that they have.
Yeah.
And it would actually allow people to build whatever home size they wanted.
Yeah, I heard something similar, but I thought it was the other way around, where they're just trying to make it all illegal.
Okay, I'll have to check on it.
Yeah, I don't recall specifically, but it would surprise me to see folks trying to legalize the tiny homes when it shouldn't be illegal in the first place. But towns do it to sort of protect but they don't want people living in tiny homes. We'll get poor people in our neighborhood, and that'll ruin our property values, and etc. Anyway, Chief Dodd also referenced Section 700.03, which lists the purpose of the codes to include aesthetic values of land and property, WSB-TV reporting. So, yeah, it seems like they're railroading.
Our view is more important than your right to live.
Seems to me they're railroading this guy.
Yep.
More Free Talk Live is on the way. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. It is Free Talk Live, the live call-in talk radio program where you can talk about anything that's on your mind. And we'll get to your calls and thoughts momentarily. The telephone number you need, though, is 603-283-6160 if you'd like to join the conversation. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the captain.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
And this land's not your land. This land's not my land. It's all taken from us by the IRS, man. Not even the forest or even rainwater. This land doesn't belong to you or me. We've been talking about this.
It does if we're willing to take them out of it to stop them from taking us off it.
We were talking about this article from the Free Thought Project about a man who's basically kicked off of his own property for living on it, albeit legally, according to his own research before he bought the property. And Ian, you had a follow-up on that about what's going on with tiny homes in the state of New Hampshire, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, sure.
We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, let's go to your calls and thoughts. We have Isaiah calling. Isaiah, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Hi, guys. How's it going?
What's on your mind?
I just have a question for all three of you. So, what is your opinion on mask wearing?
Well, if you want to
wear
one.
Are we talking about like Halloween masks, or are we talking about the masks that a bunch of people are wearing now?
You're talking COVID?
No. The COVID mask.
My opinion is that if you would like to wear one, you should go ahead and wear one. However, if you have any issue with anybody else not wearing one, well, you can go jump off a cliff.
Yeah. Because the reason I asked that is because I'm autistic, and masks are not like, I have very, very horrible sensory issues, and it's just really hard for me to wear one. You know, it's just ridiculously hard.
You should stop.
And it's just like, oh yeah, trust me, I want to. Trust me.
Why haven't you?
Well, because I'll get in trouble and I'll get the cops.
Wait a minute. Where are you calling from?
Cali.
California. So,
oh God, what are you doing in California?
So they don't respect people who have medical exemptions there?
Oh, no, they don't. I've been looked at very weirdly for wearing a mask. They've actually threatened to call the cops on me like 3 times already for that.
For not wearing a mask?
For not wearing a mask?
Yeah, for not wearing one.
And what would happen if the cops were called on you?
They would kick me out or possibly arrest me because they're trying to make it a law here. Our governor is trying to make it a law here.
Well, where we are, you can have a medical exemption by just simply saying that you do. And usually people respect that. Although this afternoon, Bonnie said that when she went into one of the gas stations here in Keene on West Street, and they told her to that she had to purchase a mask in order to stay in the store and wear it in the store, and they would not respect her medical exemption. So she told them she would go get her gas elsewhere. And the next place we went, they were totally cool. In fact, that almost never happens up here. What happened to her today? In my experience.
Isaiah, I had a question for you. Have you actually read the legislation or the piece of bureaucratic paperwork where they're calling for you to wear a mask and read through it to see if there is something in there about medical exemptions?
No, they've never sent me one at all. Like, they have never sent me one since this started.
Right. Well, you can go on. You should be able to go online and find the actual mandate for the masks and have a read, because my understanding is that most states have something written in there for medical exemptions.
Now, obviously, it is up to the business owner. If they want to tell people who have medical issues that they don't want their business, I fully support their right to do that. So, but you have to remember, when you go into a place, just because there's a sign on the door that says a thing doesn't actually mean that's what the business actually wants. It's what the business is saying to make people happy, to appease a certain group of really cowardly people who they believe are a large chunk of their business. So I was just down, Bonnie and I took Mark to the airport today, and that was down in Connecticut. Now, Connecticut is a mask-crazy land. They're very, there's like mask mandates across the state, and it's a bad place. But there was a gas station that we went to. We had to pee, so we went over to a gas station that looked, not like a scuzzy one. So we went to one of the nicer looking gas stations, and there was a sign on the door that said masks required. I think it said no exemptions, or it said medical exemptions will bring it out to you. So they didn't want anybody going into the store without a mask. Bonnie went in. She had to go first. They didn't say anything to her while she went to the bathroom and left. I went in, went to the bathroom. They didn't say anything to me on the way in, and I figured I'm going to put them to the test. I went and I grabbed a drink from the cooler and walked up to the counter, and the lady checked me out, no problem. She did say to me as I was leaving, "Oh, next time you'll need to wear a mask." And I said, "Oh, no, thanks. I don't do that." Yeah, and walked out.
You're like me. It's common courtesy if you're on the road and you're traveling and you stop somewhere to use the bathroom that you should at least try. If you got the money to drop a couple of dollars,
absolutely,
at the place. It's a courtesy thing. For
absolutely,
me.
I'm more than happy to do that. And so I didn't have any issue with that particular encounter, even in Connecticut, which is a crazy place for masks. So
full of Connecticut Yankees.
Yeah, but if they really want to be clear, if they come up to me and they say, we don't want you in here without a mask, and I say, well, I'm medically exempted, they say, we don't care, we don't want people who are medically exempt shopping with us, then I'll say, okay. And I will walk out. I'll put the items down that I had been ready to purchase. I'll put it down, and then I'll leave. And that's fine.
Isaiah, I just wanted to tell you as well, I don't know specifically how to find any of these in your area, but they do exist. There are groups of people who also do not enjoy masking.
Freedom Cells. Try them.
Freedom Cells first.
freedomcells.org, I believe, is the website.
And also peoplesrights.org, which is an Ammon Bundy thing. Different ones seem to be bigger in different areas, so check them both out.
Yeah, your best bet, though, of course, is to move physically to another place. If you're a liberty-minded person, you really ought to get out of California and consider seriously a migration to New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I thank you for your guys' advice, and you guys are doing an amazing job by doing your talk show. I really respect you guys.
Good luck. Thanks,
Appreciate
it.
Thanks. Let's move on to, we've got Dave in New Hampshire calling. Dave, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, well, I hope this doesn't come off as virtue signaling, but there's this concept that you should stand up for the rights of your enemies. And our enemies are in New Hampshire tend to be politicians. And something bad happened to politicians earlier this week. I don't know. I'm not sure if you heard about it.
No, what?
Have you followed what the Republican House Speaker did to the Democratic politicians in New Hampshire around February 23rd?
I have a story. Was this the meeting that they had in the soccer stadium, or is this prior to that?
Well, it wasn't held at the State House. I'm not sure exactly where it was held.
Is this the one where the Democrats stormed out?
Yes.
Okay. I do have a story about that. I don't think we've discussed it on Free Talk Live yet, though. So what about it?
Okay, so what happened is the Republican House Speaker, Sherman Packard, locked Democrats into the House, or into the building where they were holding the meeting.
You mean like closed the doors and turned the latches and physically locked them inside?
Yeah. So, and I just, to me, that seemed like the Democrats referred to it as holding them hostage. And in my mind, I think he's got a point. I think that they kind of were holding the Democrats hostage.
Well, if the Democrats will promise not to hold me hostage for my choices, then I'll support their right not to be held hostage.
This is actually a pretty hilarious story, and if we get the chance, I'd like to talk about it further. I've had this story, and it involves these Democrats who are just out of their minds. One of them actually wearing seriously, unironically wearing a plague doctor's mask at this particular event. It's pretty ridiculous what they did. And here's what I would say to what you've brought up here, Dave, is that these people agreed to the rules of the House. And so this guy is just playing by the rules.
Dave, do you want to hang on?
Sure.
Okay, stand by. We'll bring you back. 603-283-6160 is our phone number here in the studio. If you'd like to join the conversation, more Free Talk Live is coming up. Yeah, he said. Yeah. It is Free Talk Live. Yeah.
Moni Moni.
The telephone number here is 603-283-6160. Again, 603-283-6160. In the studio, it's myself, the captain.
It's Ian.
And Billy Idol was underrated.
Billy Idol. Idol.
What about the Weird Al version? Wasn't it alimony, money?
Oh,
I believe it was.
Here she comes now, wanting alimony.
We had a caller, and we still have the caller. It's Dave in New Hampshire of the Ridley Report. And he called in to talk about the Democrats getting locked into the House. It's my understanding, Dave, that the Republicans just locked everybody, not just the Democrats, into the House.
That is correct.
Accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, the Democrats left. Mostly it was Democrats. Can you guys still hear me? Because you're breaking up.
We got you.
We got you.
Okay, so the Democrats left to try and deny the Republicans a quorum. And so when, I think when roughly half or 2/3 of the Democrats had left, that's roughly when they locked the doors, and that allowed the House to maintain a quorum, enough to do votes. But now it didn't have enough Democrats in it for the Democrats to affect anything. So they pushed through a bill.
It's hilarious.
I like the sound of this. I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, the bill they were voting on is an abortion bill. So it's the pro-lifers who were doing things on this, but it's not the worst of abortion bills, that said.
Can we just do late-term abortions on politicians?
Wasting that energy on an anti-liberty issue, that's sad.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough people here yet. The Libertarians are not the majority in the State House, but there is a good liberty I don't know what you call them, contingent, I suppose you could say.
A liberty block.
In there. But do you want me to give you some details on this, Captain? Because it's an interesting story. Normally politics isn't very interesting.
Lay it
on
me,
one's
brother.
particularly entertaining. And Dave, if you want to stay on, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I actually wanted him to stay on to get his comments on this story.
This story is from Christopher Maidment, who is actually worth noting who this reporter is. He's the guy who got ticketed outside of the governor's house 2 months ago or whatever it was. Remember when? When 9 people got tickets outside of, including our listener and Bill Domenico.
Yep.
Christopher Maidment was there to report on the protest.
Right.
Also received a ticket. So the same guy is doing this reporting here. He's writing it over at nhjournal.com. A last-ditch attempt to stop a vote on an abortion-related bill left New Hampshire House Democrats locked out of the legislative process literally after they stormed out of session, leaving behind a temporary GOP supermajority. It was just one of many contentious moments at the House session held at the Sportsplex in Bedford on Wednesday. So first of all, this is so bizarre and so crazy. These state representatives, there's so many cowardly state reps, they're not even willing to meet in the state house. They're demanding that they meet in an actual soccer field. So there's a photograph here in the story where you can see a wide shot of the soccer field where they have, there's 400 state reps. Okay, so they've got one chair, and then 6 feet away or whatever, there's another chair. There's a 6 foot radius at least around each chair, spread out across this entire stadium.
And we have a right to attend these, don't we?
Well, that's what you would think, but right now they're having government in secret. So, no, I don't believe anyone is attending these. Except now they may be streaming them online. I'm not sure about that. The day began with a photo of the 50,000 square foot venue distributed by House GOP leadership, demonstrating the wide spaces and social distancing available beneath the towering roof of the Sportsplex. That didn't stop some House Democrats from decrying the allegedly life-threatening conditions. The state Democratic Party chairman praised members, quote, who risked their lives to attend.
Pussy!
House Democratic staffer Rachel Brady Cole and at least one Democratic state rep even wore full-body PPE suits as the session began.
Unironically, I've considered arguing wearing one of those as a joke, but these people managed to be my joke without knowing it.
And there's actually a woman here, Nicole Klein Knight, a Democrat from Manchester, who literally is wearing a plague doctor mask, also unironically.
Coward!
According to the announcement at the beginning of the session, there were 24 Democrats with excused absences, but just 2 Republicans. So the Republicans already had a majority in the state house, and now they have an even greater majority.
Excused absences? Do they have to call the principal or something?
I guess. Thereby expanding their majority. As Republicans won vote after vote, the frustration began to build. After a pro-life bill easily passed and another was moved forward in the schedule, Democrats decided they'd had enough. Democratic leader Rennie Cushing said, "The Democrats are going home now," he announced to Speaker Sherm Packard. And the Speaker's a Republican. As Democrats rushed to leave the venue, it appeared their goal was to stop the Republicans from passing legislation by denying them a quorum. Without a quorum of 199 members, or one person less than half of the House, the only motion in order is to adjourn the body. So they couldn't continue if they lost the quorum. But Cushing miscalculated. By announcing his strategy, he gave the Speaker the ability to act. Packard, invoking his powers as Speaker to maintain the quorum, promptly ordered the doors locked. The quorum was maintained, though a number of Democrats defied the order and even state police to make it out of the venue.
Did he say, by the power of Grayskull, when he invoked his powers?
I don't know. But the point I'm making here is that they all agree to a bunch of these rules. So when you join as a state representative, there's House rules, which are different from the rules that people have to follow in the state House. So for a while, when the Democrats were in charge, they made a House rule that said state reps may no longer carry guns into the House chamber. We could carry guns into the House chamber, but they couldn't. So now, of course, some of the state reps continued to conceal carry and broke these rules. And what is the penalty for breaking the rules? Honestly, I don't know. Obviously, some of these Democrats ignored the rule and still went through whatever guards were at the door anyway. Yeah. But apparently enough of them were too cowardly of the state police to actually go through the doors.
Use their cowardice against them.
Mr. Dave, your thoughts?
So first of all, no aggression, no grievance. If the House members, Democrat or Republican, want to act up by wearing certain types of clothing or whatnot, or street theater, they're completely within their rights to do that. And second, we should not be comfortable with imprisoning people.
I am completely comfortable with it happening to the people who want to imprison us.
Yeah. I mean, if you live by the prison, you should die by the prison.
Right. These people love the state, so they got a taste of it.
There's this concept, that goes back to Nelson Mandela of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, where and it's also when they overthrew the Argentine dictators, the right-wing dictators there, this concept that you don't necessarily go on a witch hunt for the people who have committed abuses. You just get them out of power, right? And that's how they maintained the peace in Australia and South Africa after apartheid and after the Argentine dictators.
Well, they changed their minds.
They were merciful toward their oppressors.
They changed their mind in South Africa. They're now killing people there for being white.
Thanks for the call tonight, Dave. We appreciate it.
There's more to the story, by the way, including a quote from a former advertiser here on Free Talk Live, who's now the state majority leader.
We'll get to that and more. 603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live on the way. Tonight it's myself, the captain.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
And Ian, you were regaling us with this bit about the New Hampshire lock-in, as it were.
Yeah, Dave Ridley called in to bring this up, and he seemed overly concerned with the plight of these poor Democrats who got locked into this, what is now the State House, in a soccer stadium in this insane COVID world where they're now keeping 400 state reps 6 feet away from one another. And so anyway, what happened was they were losing votes because they're in the minority, and there were 24 Democrats who didn't show up that day, so they're even more in the minority.
Right.
And so they were losing vote after vote, so they decided they were going to walk. And they all got up as a group and tried to leave, and the Speaker of the House, who has certain powers or whatever to continue, like it's their obligation to do the quote-unquote people's business, which is a whole load of BS, but regardless, that's what they believe.
He rolled a 30 die and invoked some powers.
And he decided to lock the doors, supposedly, or somehow bar these state representatives from leaving. Well, still some, according to the article at nhjournal.com, were still able to get past the state police. The woman who wore the plague doctor's mask that we were talking about earlier, unironically, Nicole Klein Knight, posted on Twitter, all in caps, "We busted through the police to leave. S just hit the fan. Speaker unlawfully locks us in the sportsplex." Well, was it unlawful, or was it part of the rules? This speaker has the ability to keep a quorum, to maintain a quorum, so they can continue doing their quote-unquote business. And he was told that the Democrats intended to stop the quorum, to end the quorum.
Right.
And so he just invoked that rule. State Republican Majority Leader Jason Osborne. You guys know him?
Yes.
Yeah, he's the majority leader. That means he's the highest ranking Republican besides the Speaker of the House.
Okay.
This guy's a free stater. So he's actually a former advertiser here on Free Talk Live. If it weren't for Jason Osborne, we might not even be here today. He was an angel advertiser on Free Talk Live in some of our earliest days. Thank you, Sekel CAI, which was his business at the time.
Nice.
For supporting this show. So he's been playing the game, and he's gotten himself into a fairly influential role as a result. Anyway, he had this to say, quote, "I'm disappointed, but I suppose I'm not surprised over the highly juvenile antics by House Democrats. Rather than doing their job and debating the legislation before the House, they abandoned their responsibility to their constituents only because legislation they disagreed with passed. The last 2 years, Republicans were in the minority, and we know it's not fun to lose on legislation we felt passionate about, but we continually showed up to do our job. We never took our ball and went home, leaving our constituents hanging. This was an embarrassing display of pettiness, and I hope their constituents take notice. House Republicans will continue to show up and do our job," unquote. After nearly an hour of further delaying tactics, including parliamentary inquiries of the chair, roll calls, and ruling challenges, the almost entirely Republican body voted to approve a measure that requires infants born alive to receive medically appropriate and reasonable care and treatment. So as far as abortion bills go, it's, not the most objectionable of them. Meanwhile, the same...
Yeah, I mean, once you've taken first breath... Yeah, you're pretty much alive.
Meanwhile, the same Democrats who had demanded to leave the session in order to avoid voting were now demanding to be allowed back in to cast their votes.
No. We wanted to be in. Wait, let us back in.
One Democrat who remained inquired of Packard where in his purview he could keep members from coming back once the doors were locked, citing a New Hampshire Constitution article that prohibits police from detaining members on their way to session. The Speaker cited his constitutional authority to lock the chamber doors and eventually ruled one Democrat member dilatory for intentionally delaying House business. Quote, "These dilatory tactics will not be tolerated anymore," he told what remained of the third largest English-speaking legislative body in the world. Some Democrats announced or denounced the Speaker's decision to lock the doors, at least one comparing it to being, quote, held hostage. Republicans reminded Democrats that last March, as the COVID pandemic began and the NHGOP was in the majority, Democrats oversaw a session that started at 9 a.m. on March 12th and didn't end until nearly 4 a.m. the next day, all with few GOP complaints and no walkout. During that session, the Speaker at the time, who was a Democrat, had the Sergeant-at-Arms lock the doors late in the evening to maintain a quorum, even without the Republican minority attempting to take their ball and go home. So this isn't unprecedented. This has happened before.
So what's the difference between this and a filibuster?
A filibuster is where you prevent a vote from occurring by continuing to debate on it. And the thing is, it requires
because they just go on and on and on and on and on.
2/3 majority to close debate on an issue, even though it only takes a 50% majority to win the vote once it comes.
Okay.
So you can prevent a vote that you can't win by denying the majority that is not a supermajority the closure of the vote, but in order to, or the closure of debate, but in order to do that, you have to keep talking.
Okay.
And so Rand Paul did that famously one time. He did a very good one.
Yeah, I think I remember the
news
news clip on that where it was just, and he just kept going and going and going and going and going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
story.
That's the end result.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
so it's at the very least it's an interesting situation that has brewed up in the New Hampshire State House.
Can somebody introduce a bill that calls for late-term abortions on anybody who's a politician?
Oh, man, that's a great idea.
I mean, how late does a late-term abortion have to be?
Yeah.
Can it be just, as late as possible? I know most of the politicians are
I
aged
support
people.
abortion for the first 90 trimesters.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, at least these politicians are, I don't know, not, messing with people while they're going through this sort of rigmarole.
Well, I mean, that's
Infighting,
the reason they're there, is to mess with people.
I know, but I'd prefer them to play stupid games against each other than against the general population.
Yeah. But, think of the things that the Republicans could have done while they had that supermajority. They could have repealed every gun law in the state, but they didn't. They could have repealed every tax in the state, but they didn't.
Could have legalized marijuana.
Well, no, they couldn't, nobody, because they didn't have the legislation in front of them. They can't introduce the legislation in that time frame. That has to be done in August.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to have a repeal of all the gun laws, what you ought to do is reach out to the Liberty reps and ask them to put that bill in.
Okay.
Speaking of the Liberty reps and putting bills in, when's New Hampshire going to get, off the pot, as it were, and get, on the pot with the legalization of marijuana?
I don't want to see it legalized. I'd just rather see the end of prohibition.
Well, okay, whatever form it takes, yeah. I'm down with.
I honestly don't know what has been put forward in this particular session.
It just seems to me that if we have Liberty folk, in these positions, that would be one of the first things.
Yeah. Last year, they did have a bill that was for further decriminalization of marijuana as well as other drugs.
Yeah.
So to take felonies down to misdemeanors, that kind of thing.
Right.
And misdemeanors down to violations. That I believe that didn't get anywhere because of COVID. So I don't know where it sits for this year.
I thought the coward Sununu vetoed.
It never made it out of
More Free Talk Live is on the way.
House.
Yes, it is Free Talk Live. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you'd like to join the conversation, the telephone number in the studio is 603-283-6160. Again, 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the captain.
And it's Ian.
And nobody.
And I was mentioning during the break here that this may be an historic episode of Free Talk Live because we managed to get the words defibrillator and filibuster mentioned in this evening's program.
Indeed.
And I don't know if that's ever been done before.
Nobody believes you.
Great, thanks. Did we have more on the story?
Are you talking about the state reps?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
No,
right.
That's it.
Time for a segue, you say. Well, you know,
one of those little two-wheeled carts.
Yeah,
I still have the tiny homes if you wanted to talk about
yes,
that.
Oh,
the
yeah,
tiny
we did want to talk
homes.
about the tiny homes. Let's talk about that.
Which does have to do with the state reps because it is a bill that they are considering in the state house.
Well,
But it has more to do with the prior story about the people getting thrown off their land
Correct.
because
They wanted to
they
live in
couldn't
an
afford
RV.
a big enough house.
which was in Georgia.
Yep.
Although that said, before we say, it can't happen here in the free state of New Hampshire, well, it's not free here. There's all kinds of little tyrants around here. Friend of the show and state representative Mike Sylvia, just to prove to you that not even the state reps are immune from this crap, he was actually allegedly living in an RV on what he thought was his property, as well as in the garage. He had bought a house, or what was a house. He bought a lot that had a home on it that had burned down.
Okay.
But the garage had not burned down.
The garage remained.
So he got a good deal on this piece of property, and he parked an RV on the property, and during the wintertime, a code enforcer spotted smoke coming from the chimney on the garage. And he, I guess, scoped the house out some more and thought he saw Mike Sylvia walking into the RV in the middle of wintertime, which means he must be living on the property, and he doesn't have a permission slip to live in his RV on his own property, nor in the garage because there's no bathroom.
I think
therefore,
I remember this story.
I wrote about it over at freekeen.com. It happened a couple of years ago. In fact, I think you went with me to the
I was
court
at the
hearing.
trial.
There was a trial. He lost, sadly. And so,
we should find that code enforcer and start just going by his house and finding anytime something's left outside. I'm sure that's a violation of a city code. Call the police.
They won't do anything about it. They'll just ignore it. They'll use discretion when it comes to one of their own. So it's sort of, we've seen this happen here. This has happened here. Yes. It's happened. Mike Sylvia, by the way, is an A+ rated state rep in the state house. He actually a couple of years ago won the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance Award for most liberty-oriented rep of all the 400 state reps, and he's a Free Talk Live longtime listener and supporter. So
wow.
Thank you, Mike, for your service. He was actually there was a gathering at Fun Spot, which is a massive arcade here in New Hampshire, supposedly the largest in the world. He was hanging out there over the weekend.
Nice.
So all-around good guy. He came to your 420s and smoked up on the State House steps one year.
He told me he'd come if I wore a suit, so I wore a tux.
Yeah, and he smoked. Got a great picture of Mike Sylvia with a joint in his mouth at this event. So I mean, this is our kind of state rep. Anyway, New Hampshire is now considering a bill, according to ConcordMonitor.com's Anna Brown at Citizens Count, that would require towns to allow tiny houses alongside single-family homes. Supporters envision a future where tiny house aficionados flock to New Hampshire, bolstering our workforce. Opponents are concerned about the erosion of local control and property values.
Yeah, I don't want to be controlled by the government, local, state, or federal. So I'm all about erosion of local control.
There are way too many places where they treat, much like the story earlier, the tiny home folks as if they are, some sort of criminal for existing on their own land.
Well, the story
you can't afford a big enough house, therefore you must be homeless.
The story you had a minimum of 1,200 square foot in order for it to be considered in Georgia a home.
Well, in that county, that was one of the things. But you can read the rest of the story, of course, on our social media. But in that story, basically what was happening is they were throwing different statutes or different line items from different places at this one guy, none of which applied, because it turns out that the guy did his research accurately and he should have been legally okay to be there with his RV and that kind of a thing. But They decided it didn't help them, no.
So a tiny house is generally 100 to 400 square feet. A tiny house can sit on a foundation or on a trailer. Some tiny houses are equipped with full kitchens and plumbing, while others are designed to live off-grid with composting toilets. Tiny homes have gained popularity as affordable and eco-friendly housing options over the past decade. However, many towns, counties, and states have zoning laws or building codes that require houses to have a minimum square footage. Tiny houses on wheels may be categorized as RVs and unsuitable, according to the government at least, for year-round living. In 2016...
Well, it's a lot better than being homeless.
Yeah.
You know, people are always saying, what's the government going to do about homelessness? Maybe the government should just stop making people homeless.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is that, George Carlin points out that the homeless person isn't really, they're houseless, right? And we've seen time and time again when somebody steps up and decides to provide shelters, right? Tiny homes, if you will, for some of these homeless people of their own volition as a charitable contribution, and the state comes in and takes them all down. They tear them down and they get rid of them because they weren't approved.
Yeah. Well, the state thrives on poverty, on homelessness, on all kinds of suffering and misery. That's what the state requires to justify its existence, and therefore that's what the state creates.
Agreed.
In 2016, New Hampshire passed a law that enabled municipalities to permit small, quote, detached accessory dwelling units, unquote, next to regular homes, but not every town opted in. Towns can also set their own minimum dimensions for accessory dwelling units. And that's because sometime in the past, the state representatives allowed towns to create zoning laws. And that's where all these problems came from. Because New Hampshire, for those that aren't familiar, is not a what they call a home rule state. So in a home rule state, towns and cities can pass all kinds of ordinances that they want to. Basically, it doesn't matter what they say.
They can just make up whatever they like.
Right. In a non-home rule state like New Hampshire, the only thing that towns and cities can pass, in theory, legally, is something they've been authorized to pass by the state. Now, you say to yourself, well, that means that the state is centrally controlling things. Central control is bad. In the case of the state, not necessarily. Not in a state like New Hampshire, which is generally a smaller government state than other states. Generally, it's hard to pass new laws here, so it's actually beneficial to have this central control because it tells the little tyrants in the towns, you can't do that. You can't pass this. But sadly, they did tell them you can have zoning, and now some towns have zoning. In fact, most of them do, and that's why these tiny houses are illegal. So this would essentially be telling the towns that have zoning, hey, you can have your zoning, but you can't tell these people they can't have their tiny homes. Right. So it would give a carve-out, essentially. Now, that's not what we want. We want to abolish zoning completely, right?
Yes.
But it's a step.
It's a step. Yeah. It's a step in the right direction. So Brianna O'Brien of Hampton Falls became a bit of a poster child for the New Hampshire tiny house movement after she tried to live in a tiny house on her parents' property. The Zoning Board of Adjustment denied her occupancy permit for a few reasons, including the tiny house did not meet the town's definition of a detached accessory dwelling unit. O'Brien was forced to abandon the tiny house. This year, 3 New Hampshire representatives, 2 Republicans and a Democrat, are sponsoring Bill HB 588, which would welcome tiny houses to New Hampshire. It would require towns to allow standalone tiny houses anywhere they allow single-family homes. So it doesn't take away...
Now, this would fix Mike Sylvia's problem, would it not?
It would depend on how they define tiny house. So let's go on. Tiny house, anywhere they allow single-family homes. So they're not going to make it so that it overrides all the zoning laws in that you wouldn't be able to build a tiny house next to a commercial district. But in a place where homes are already allowed, so would tiny homes. If a municipality allows detached accessory dwelling units, the bill would require the town to accept tiny houses under the same terms. The bill establishes various other requirements for tiny houses. For example, they have to follow fire codes. If it's on a trailer, the trailer must be licensed, registered, and inspected. So maybe that answers your question that if it's on a trailer, it might be okay. Lastly, the bill requires towns and cities to pass zoning laws to address tiny home parks, a group setting of at least 4 tiny houses. This is a repeat of a bill from last year, which died during the coronavirus shutdown.
Wow, something died during the coronavirus. Who knew?
Yeah. Well, and I wonder what happens if you put 3 tiny homes in a place. But we don't need to get into that.
Yeah.
The control
what do you
freaks
get when you
comments.
gather 2 crows?
What?
Attempted murder.
Attempted murder. 603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live is on the way.
Is this Free Talk Live?
I believe so.
Okay.
Thanks for asking, because I wasn't sure myself. If only somebody would tell us, like right at the re-intro of the program, every time when the music is playing, whether or not this was or was not Free Talk Live. That might be helpful.
It would.
I'll try to remember to do that for every segment from here on out.
Yes, it is.
The telephone number is 603-283-6160. We'll get to your calls in just a moment. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the captain.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
And, well, let's just go right to it, shall we? We've got Jeff calling from Massachusetts, I believe. Jeff, you're on Free Talk Live.
How's it going, man?
Good. What's on your mind?
All right. Hey, I just wanted to interject on the small houses you were talking about.
Yeah.
I got some, expertise into that because I get to see them firsthand. I assume you've seen, how they've been going up in L.A., and there's people living on tents on the streets, like all over, like Venice and even in parts of Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of that. I was in Seattle, Washington for well over 20 years, up until a couple of years ago when I moved to New Hampshire.
I stay the hell out of California.
But they certainly have tent cities and homeless everywhere, and folks have tried to build them shelters that are very similar to tiny homes, if not tiny homes themselves, and the government keeps coming in and saying, no, you can't do that.
Well, what happens first, from what I've noticed, is these little tiny houses, which are way more attractive looking and go with the neighborhood than these ratty tents and sheets and just the filth that comes with them. Those are allowed to stay, but these little houses, if they're across from a NIMBY, a NIMBY with money.
That means not in my backyard.
Those are the people who get the government to get rid of them because they are their, part of their big donor base. And I saw that happen firsthand because two of my best friends were living in tiny manufactured homes on the Venice-Santa Monica line.
Mm-hmm.
And a next neighbor across the street, she wouldn't have it. We all called her Miss NIMBY.
Okay.
The multimillionaire. That's really where it starts. They listen to who gives them the money, and then they go from there.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. How do you solve that? Just find ways to make that person's life a living hell until they stop calling the police, or maybe call in a SWAT raid on the NIMBY. Say they've got drugs in their house and bring in a SWAT team to kill them.
I personally was ready to burn her house down because she was such a what.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to go to prison.
Yeah. Well,
know what I mean?
They're not worth it.
Oh my gosh, man! It's just. It's just a divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get any better.
I know that they call it in the Seattle, Washington area, they call it Tent City. And what happens to it is that it keeps moving. So somebody will volunteer some plot of land, and all the homeless people can move all their tents there. And they're being managed by some government entity where they send in people who try and help them, get on their feet, get into real apartments and, that kind of stuff. But this tent city keeps moving because of what you're talking about, which is the NIMBY. So it'll arrive in somebody's backyard for a while, and then all the homeless will, come and go whenever, they have to or want to. And then eventually the neighborhood will get tired of it, or somebody in the neighborhood will, and they'll be like, no, we got to get rid of this thing. And so then somebody else feels sorry for them and says, okay, well, you could come over to our community, and then they move into that community, and then they get tired of them after a period of time. So Tent City itself keeps moving from community to community.
Put a Band-Aid. That's all it is. They just put Band-Aids on it. They don't go after the roots of this problem,
right.
And they don't want to invest in it. The short-term costs are too much. They'd rather pay more over the long term.
Mm. The actual solution would cost absolutely nothing. The actual solution is, remember that the property rights regime of Western society comes from the Second Treatise on Government by John Locke, who writes that it is okay to appropriate land to my exclusive use so long as much and as good remains for others to expropriate. So as soon as the government claimed all of the unclaimed land and said nobody can ever homestead this, then every single private piece of private property in the country became invalid. And so the solution is get the government up off that land.
Yep.
Yeah,
I didn't hear what you were saying. I was still talking. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, that's who is avoiding, unfortunately. And I mean, there's just if you're a landlord, I mean, it's like we're back to feudalism. Back when was that, in the Middle Ages?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's that could be where we're headed. Was land issues. I mean, even public property. I mean, I grew up on Cape Cod. I grew up in the Army, and the homeless shelter in Hyannis, it was like 80 people, and then they eliminated half of them because neighbors are complaining.
Jeez.
So they had nowhere to go.
They eliminated them?
Here in Keene, the homeless people were actually building a shanty in the woods nearby one of the shopping centers with the blessings of the shopping center owner. The guy who owned the property on which they were building this was like, it's fine with me. They're over here. They're in the woods. They can have their little shanty.
No problem.
Yeah, they weren't causing any problems. And the city government, this was like, I don't know, 12 years ago at least. It was a while back. But the city government said, well, but you can't be building. You don't have a permit. This isn't up to fire code. You're going to have to take this thing down. So they went in and they destroyed these people.
I don't know why they go after the homeless and the poor as their cash cow. You know what I mean?
Well, they're not a cash cow.
They
obviously
do it because if there weren't any homeless people, the government would have no excuse to exist. So they have to keep people homeless and helpless so that we keep paying our taxes. But you mentioned the feudalism. The main difference between now and feudalism is during feudalism, they had kingdoms run by kings and counties run by counts, and now we have countries.
Different types of peasants now.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the call tonight, Jeff. We appreciate it. Yeah, we certainly do, and we know who runs the countries. And it's
true.
And it's not, you and I, it's not the people. The people is an artificial construct that they get you to believe, because the will of the people doesn't really exist.
Oh, now you're verging into Nietzsche. The government is the coldest of cold monsters. Coldly it lies, and this lie falls from its lips, that I, the government, am the people.
The people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people buy that crap.
And it's just not true.
It's demonstrably not true.
No, it's...
Well, I mean,
it's us and them.
There can't be a will of the people, because
people are different.
Yeah, everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. Everybody thinks differently, feels differently, has different needs, wants, and desires.
Which is why we just can't get along with everybody. We cannot come together.
You're not supposed to.
No, of course not. But yet, people keep trying to make this union work, and it's time for it to end. It's time for secession now.
Agreed.
NIMBYs have every right to exist, but not in my backyard.
Oh, I miss George Carlin. I wish he was alive. I could really use to hear a, hour and a half HBO comedy special on his commentary on what's going on today.
There's nobody like him.
Well, there wasn't. Past tense. R.I.P. Mr. Carlin. 603-283-6160. Do you have a solution for the homeless? Give us a call.
Let them homestead or arm the poor.
Let us know your thoughts. We've got more Free Talk Live on the way. A program where you can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever's on your mind. Our telephone number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. If you'd like to join us, that is the number you should dial. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the captain.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
And Forkfest 2021 is coming up. Yay!
All right, I'll be there.
I made we'll call it a partial reservation today for the time off that I know that I have. And then I plan to expand that should my other time off come through. But at any rate, you can join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, or libertarians, from June 28th through July 4th for Forkfest 2021 at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Forkfest happens the week after the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and Forkfest is decentralized, which means no one is in charge. It also means there's no ticket cost. Just reserve your camping, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 28th through July 4th. Where better to celebrate Independence Day than around other freedom-loving activists in the Shire? You can relax and enjoy the camaraderie of like-minded people, or you can create whatever experience or event you'd like others to have. If you're planning an event for Forkfest, be sure to let others know in advance. You can connect with fellow Forkfesters via the unofficial Telegram chat or the Forkfest forum. Links to those are on the unofficial website forkfest.party. Mark your calendar for June 28th through July 4th, 2021, and we'll see you at forkfest.party. I'm looking forward to it.
Nobody thinks that's a good idea, and nobody's going to show up.
I'm glad. Or am I? Segue. I don't have a really good segue, but I know here on Free Talk Live, one of the most hated areas, hated might be a strong word, one of the most tyrannical areas consistently is New York. New York City.
Oh, yeah.
New York City.
New York. And I thought somehow this article from GQ.com made its way into my purview. And it states, the most ambitious effort yet to reform policing may be happening in Ithaca, New York.
Okay. Ithaca, known as a lefty town, college town.
So we've been hearing all about, this police reform stuff or, defund the police and all this kind of thing. So I'm not sure. When I read through this article, I came away thinking, I don't know if this is going to be, some form of progress in defunding, or ending police as we know it, or if it's going to be one of these things that fails immediately and everybody points at it and goes, see, it doesn't work. I'm not quite certain. But Mayor Svante, I may be pronouncing that wrong, Svante Myrik's new proposal would replace the city's existing police department with a Department of Community Solutions and Public Safety intended to reduce the involvement of armed officers in disputes. It's been 9 months since the George Floyd protests thrust defund the police and other abolitionist rhetoric into the mainstream political discourse, yet the results have been meager so far. While some municipalities have sliced significant chunks from their police budgets, $150 million in both Los Angeles and Austin, Texas, a Bloomberg News review found that about half of the nation's largest cities saw their 2021 police budgets either increase or stay the same. Surprise, surprise. Of those departments that have cut back police funding, the Associated Press found defunding has been modest, not monumental. Yet even as mainstream political operatives have declared the concept a political loser, just last week President Biden reiterated his opposition to defunding during a CNN town hall. Surprise, surprise. Interestingly enough, he opposes everything that his supporters support. Strange, isn't it? Not to me. Except for not being Trump. He isn't Trump. That's the one thing that he does that they want him to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Say anything to get elected, do anything to stay in. That's how it goes. A handful of cities have significantly re-examined the role of their police. In Berkeley, California, armed officers no longer conduct traffic stops or respond to mental health and homelessness calls. Portland ended the deployment of school resource officers, long linked to the criminalization of black and brown youth and the so-called school-to-prison pipeline. And now, in a proposal announced today, the mayor of Ithaca, New York, will attempt the most radical reimagining of policing in the post-George Floyd era so far, abolishing the city's police department as currently constructed and replacing it with a reimagined city agency. In a nearly 100-page report obtained by GQ, Mayor Myrick will propose replacing the city's current 63-officer, $12.5 million a year department with a Department of Community Solutions and Public Safety, quote unquote, which would include armed public safety workers and unarmed community solution workers, all of whom will report to a civilian director of public safety instead of a police chief. Under the proposal, all current officers would have to reapply for a position within the newly created department.
So they're going to change the name of cops.
Yep.
And?
Well, they're going to not have a police chief.
They're going to change the name of the bureaucrat.
Well, instead, they're going to have a civilian, which is different. A police chief is normally a career cop.
Right.
If they're actually hiring a civilian who's never been a cop to be the director of public safety, that might be an improvement, because to them, it's not normal just to beat people down because they disagree with them.
But it will be. It's only a matter of time before that's normal to them, because it's still going to be a bureaucrat who has total monopoly control over whatever this department is going to look like, this renamed police department. Now, color me skeptical. You still got a monopoly here, and power does what it does, and it's going to corrupt whoever this person is.
Yeah, well, they'd be a lot better off just letting, each individual decide who they will pay to protect them.
Yeah. I like the idea of the unarmed folks, right? I don't think people responding to mental crises, all sorts of things that these armed thugs show up to. I think it would be a lot better.
Psychiatric nurses almost never carry guns.
Right. And so, people responding to that type of a thing should not be armed, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's free market or not, right? It's too much. There's too much temptation, I think, for, everything looks like a nail when you're a hammer. If you're a policeman and you're wearing the badge, you're all gung-ho about your power on your power trip, and if somebody doesn't do what you say, you're very quick to use that gun on the other individuals, as we've seen repeatedly throughout time.
Yeah, see, if I was doing that, I like the idea of sending out a trio, 2 unarmed guys in front, 1 armed guy in the back, just to kind of cover them.
603-283-6160. More on this idea out of New York. Who are these people on the radio? What are they talking about? Where are they from?
Is it Free Talk Live?
When did they start doing this? Why would they continue to do so? And how is it that...
Why hasn't anybody stopped them?
And how is it that somebody put me in front of this microphone? All those questions can be answered and more here on Free Talk Live. Whether they will or not remains to be seen. But it is Free Talk Live. In case you missed it, it is Free Talk Live. That's the name of the show, Free Talk Live. Our telephone number is 603-283-6160. We'll get to your calls and thoughts momentarily. We've got some callers on hold. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the Reverend Captain Kickass.
It's Ian.
And nobody.
And we've been talking about this article from GQ about a newly proposed reform of the police department in Ithaca, New York, of all places. And we could talk more about that, of course. But first, let's go to the anarcho-republican.
Hey, I love that Nietzsche quote there.
Oh, thank you.
I think he was an anarcho-Christian. If I didn't know
he was not a Christian, I don't believe, but he was definitely an anarchist.
He was a spooky antichrist. But anyway, that sounds very anarcho-Christian, to be honest. A beautiful quote. Well done.
What's on your mind?
I have to admit, sent the Holy Spirit tingles down my spine. Hey, what I wanted to talk about was, well, the answer for the homeless is obvious. We used to say it back in the punk rock days: eat the rich. It's the best thing we could do. I think Liz Cheney would be particularly tasty. She's been fattening herself up on that.
What's wrong with people who are rich? I mean, there's nothing wrong with people who are wealthy if they've actually achieved their wealth through voluntary means by actually making something valuable in the marketplace.
It was just something dumb we used to say in the 70s and 80s, Ian. It was just something dumb we used to say.
See, I definitely what I do think is eat the government.
Okay. Are you guys there still?
Yep, we're
here. Right here.
Loud and clear.
Okay, I thought you cut me loose. Anyway, I wanted to tell you, you're talking about this new type of police force, this leftist version of the wokey-doke police. But you got to be careful. Have you guys seen the movie Wild in the Streets?
No.
Are you familiar with that movie?
No.
What is it?
It's like George Orwell. It's like 1984 on LSD. It was a psychedelic movie. And what happens is the young people, this pop star becomes the Republican president. And what he does is he outlaws old people, gets them all hot, gets them on acid, sends them to concentration camps. But it's the same sort of thing. The wokey-doke police take over. It's the same. It's all power is power.
It sounds like a movie I would have seen, but I don't remember it.
It's a beauty. It's got a great song. It's got a great song too. The title of it and everything. Wild in the Streets. You can get it on. I'm sure you can get it on, and you can get it. You probably can pirate it. You guys are good at that sort of thing.
I'll BitTorrent it. Definitely.
Yeah, but it's got Shirley. It's got Shirley, the fat Shirley lady from the '60s. She's the dude's mother, and she just clings to him, and he hates her, and oh boy. And it's a trippy movie.
Okay, so how does this apply to what we're talking about with the?
It's this new police force that they're talking about. It's no different than that. It's just the left is a tyranny that it's the same thing. Only that what they'll do is they'll hunt down Trump supporters maybe instead.
Well, I mean, left and right are both tyrants.
People, they'll be beating up your uncle with a red hat on. Instead of beating up black dudes, they'll be beating up your uncle with a red hat on.
Well, maybe we should not beat up anybody and, or not be forced to pay for anybody to be beaten, because certainly the police, which do, they do beat and murder all sorts of people, including minorities, on a regular basis, and they should stop doing that because, we don't need to have government-provided murdering scum. There's enough murdering scum in the world already. But at this,
Nobody agrees with that. Nobody agrees with that.
Nobody agrees with that.
But anyway, you're right. But I'd say just don't fall for the wokey-doke. Is all I'm trying to tell you. Don't fall for the wokey-doke, fellas. Hey, it's been great. Check out
I don't think
movie.
any of us are falling for it.
Check Wild in the Streets. You'll dig it the most.
Thanks.
I'll check it out. Thanks for the call.
I don't think any of us are falling for this. I'm not, at least. I mean,
like I said, I think that this is going to turn out to be one of those things where they go, see, we tried to reform it, but it didn't work. So, now we got to just do it the way we always have been. Or
I think you'll see that they make all these changes, and then when all is said and done, they make a big to-do about it, and they get all these accolades. Oh, you made so many great changes, and then, 3 years later or a year later or whatever, we'll find out that they're still cracking heads on the pavement in Ithaca. I don't know. I mean, maybe the Ithaca police weren't even that bad to begin with. I don't know, because up here, they're not the worst in the world in Keene.
College town police don't tend to be that bad. Because, a lot of college students have rich parents who get very upset if they're murdered. And so, the college towns tend to hire police that are less murder prone than your average cop.
Right. Now, when I read through this, I was surprised to see the analysis of the types of calls and their responses. And this goes on to say, IPD, that's Ithaca Police Department, spends 1/3 of its time responding to calls for service that essentially never leads to arrests, Myrick wrote in the report's introduction. Those calls, as well as a majority of patrol activity, can and should be handled by unarmed community solution workers, well-trained in de-escalation and service delivery. Again, this all sounds, like, where did this come from? Why is a politician talking about these things? This will allow our new public safety workers to focus on preventing, interrupting, and solving serious crime. If the proposal is approved, calls for service will be evaluated to determine whether an armed or unarmed respondent is necessary. or another public agency altogether would be best to respond. Mental health calls would be outsourced to a standalone unit of social workers based on the CAHOOTS program. I have no idea what the CAHOOTS program is.
I'll bet they're in cahoots with somebody.
Which was pioneered in Eugene, Oregon. The goal ultimately is to have far fewer encounters between citizens and armed government agents.
Now, if that's actually what they do, then this is laudable, if that's the case.
Right.
There have been many times where people have been having a mental health issue, and men with guns show up, and they do not make that situation better.
Right.
They will.
We've seen it get out of hand
I saw a
quickly.
video of a mother being killed in front of her 2 children.
Yeah.
Because she was having a mental health issue, and she was a little bit paranoid, and somehow men showing up with guns didn't make her feel any more comfortable.
Right.
What a shock.
There was another article I had in News Prep. I didn't put it up today, but there was another person who was kneeled upon by a police officer while he was having a mental health episode, and he died as well.
This, again, this could be done better. I mean, I'm skeptical just because it's a monopoly system, and it's going to be crappy because of that.
Yeah.
But if it does result in fewer armed men and women showing up at situations where it's not necessary to have a man with a gun show up, which is probably a large chunk of the calls to the police, right? Like somebody stole a thing, you don't need to have an armed guy come and take a report.
Right.
To file with the insurance company, right? If there's an accident on the road, do you really need to have somebody with a gun come and take a report for the insurance company in that particular case? So I'm sure there's a lot of these calls that the police with guns don't really need to be at.
All of the calls where you say, oh, abolish the police, but what are you going to do when you need somebody to show up 3 hours later, shrug, and do nothing?
Right. The article continues, everyone wants the police to perform better when they show up. Everybody wants that. What this plan is saying is that we also want the police to show up less. And that's a radical thing for a city and a mayor to do. Myrick, 33, told me in an interview Sunday. While it may have been possible to push for similar reforms within the current department, Myrick said the entrenched culture would make them impossible to fully implement. In recent years, the city has battled with the police union over discipline for problem officers, including one officer who was caught on body camera bragging about dragging a handcuffed suspect down a set of stairs, and another, these examples go on and on.
Being normal cops.
Indeed. 603-283-6160. Is police reform possible?
But there ain't no Coupe de Ville hiding in the bottom of a Cracker Jack box.
No, there is not.
As Meatloaf sang.
We've been talking about this article from GQ about Ithaca, New York, and the mayor out there has a plan to revolutionize the police department. And in order to move forward, Myrick's plan will have to be approved by the city council, which is expected to debate and vote on it by the end of March.
And they are master debaters.
They certainly are. The mayor believes his proposal is likely to gain council support, yet it remains to be seen how much opposition it may face from the city's police union, which has publicly sparred with Myrick previously and has gone nearly a decade without a contract. He says he does expect it to be a big battle. I can see.
Well, if the police union hates you, that's probably a good sign.
But yet, even with the public and law enforcement in agreement that the status quo is lacking, it remains to be seen if everyone will be on board with such a radical reimagining of public safety. While Myrick's recommendations are based on the thematic feedback collected during community meetings and forums, the specifics of the proposal have yet to receive public feedback and direct input. Often, Myrick noted, change is more risky than doing nothing, even if the results stay the same. He gave the example of a citizen who had their bike stolen. Today, perhaps they blame that on the police, or on him as a mayor, or on society as a whole. If you announce this new change and then the bike gets stolen, you wonder, was the bike stolen because the criminals are emboldened? Still, he said it's clear that the system is not working, and he'd rather try to find the solution than continue to kick the can down the road. Once you can fully imagine an alternative response agency, Myrick told me, it's hard to defend what exists currently. Well, and we've been saying almost that, imagine an alternative way to get these things done. right? Imagine a free market providing you security services. And
that's not what they've imagined here.
But that statement is kind of, it hits home to me in that's kind of my perspective of like, hey, everybody just imagine for him, because I think people have a hard time imagining.
Oh, it's difficult.
What it looks like without the government in place.
Imagine not being forced to pay for things that you don't want.
Yeah, exactly.
Only buying the products that you do want. That would be nice.
Or just the amounts of them that you need or require for yourself or your family, instead of being forced to pay for everybody else's bit.
Or the people that you choose to help.
Yeah. So I don't know. This is something maybe worth keeping an eye on, see how it goes. I'm sure if it happens, we'll hear more about it, and we'll bring it to you here on Free Talk Live. Let's go to David in New Mexico. David, you're on Free Talk Live.
I'm sure that's actually part of their intentional strategy, is to be omnipresent everywhere, to make you accustomed to that, as opposed to being distant. Even under a king, the king wasn't in every corner of the kingdom. And neither were his people. Maybe you might see a tax collector once a year come around to collect taxes. You might not see anybody else the whole year from the government.
That's a good point.
They probably felt more free then than we do now.
Another good point.
So radio, there was actually one or a good program. I don't know if it's still on. You can tell me if you're familiar with it. Where the
Free Talk Live, yeah, they're still around.
I'm sorry, the missing qualifier was on NPR, because everything else sucks on NPR.
Yeah, we're not on government public radio. I mean, national public radio.
Yeah, it was. The premise was debate, and they would come in with a proposition, and then one side would debate the proposition from the left versus the right, and it was actually pretty good. So the proposition is abolish radio. Yes or no? I would say yes. I'm not. And first of all, I'm not talking about Free Talk Live. Okay, so yeah, you guys are the best radio program on radio or on the internet or whatever.
But thanks.
You're welcome. Broadcast over the air, and I'm not talking about internet. I'm talking about the stuff where people are mindlessly flip on the radio and start changing channels to see what's out there, and then become brainwashed by whatever programming comes magically through the air to the box that they're tuning in on, as opposed to if you tune in to a radio program.
But I like being on that box.
It's true.
I don't care about what you like or not. My premise is abolish radio, and so I don't really care about what the other side thinks. Well, it might. It has in other nations. They have taken broadcast radio off of radio.
What are you talking
about? They did it for a different reason.
Where did they outlaw radio?
Iran?
They didn't outlaw it. Nobody was listening to it. So they dedicated it to functions that people would actually use it for.
Where did this happen?
In Scandinavia, you can probably find it on the internet, where I think it was Norway. They stopped broadcasting music, for instance, on FM stations. And I have not done that search. I heard it on radio.
Okay, I think you're referring to Norway going all digital. So what they did was they put down a mandate that all stations had to transition from standard sort of FM analog broadcast to an all digital format. So they still have radio. It's just in digital form, sir.
Okay, well, let's go one step further. Let's get rid of through-the-air broadcast of propaganda, which would include the Voice of America. You agree that's propaganda, right?
Yeah,
Going out to the world.
Well, I think the government should stop doing anything at all, but I also don't think the government should be enforcing bans on radios. I mean, you have a right to broadcast, and you have a right to listen to what's broadcast.
And also,
David, should government...
David,
go ahead.
Also, Free Talk Live is a propaganda show.
Yeah, well, the problem is we don't have enough radio. We don't have the freedom to broadcast what we actually want to broadcast. There's, the FCC gets in the way. It's the FCC that's the problem, and of course, they're never going to, move forward with what you're proposing.
Actually, I want to disagree on one level because radio is being misused intentionally, where it's damaging people that are hearing it. and it shouldn't be happening. And guns are good things, for instance, but the government probably should get involved if there is a group of people going around using their guns to just randomly off people, right? I mean, people should be protected against that use of a gun, right?
And if people are throwing radios in other people's bathtubs and killing them with them, I think that should be prohibited.
Yeah, usually it's the government that's randomly going around offing people. So once again, they're the problem.
That's what they're doing. They're using radio to incite people to do stupid things, and the rest of us are damaged by it.
I disagree.
Yeah, no, I mean, would you say the same thing about the internet?
No.
There's plenty of stupid on the internet. There's plenty of it.
Let me answer your question. I think that by virtue, if somebody had to decide mindfully,
he's not going to get through this. There's no way he's going to get through that.
Okay, well,
whatever it was he was going to say, he just goes and goes and goes. There's no way he's going to do it in 20 seconds.
And we are out of time. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been Free Talk Live. If you missed any of our program, visit freetalklive.com. Thanks. Peace.